What we're going to observe over the course of the next couple of days is the raising of one of the largest joint operations that police in New South Wales, emergency services and the Australian Defence Force have ever made. I am confident that everything that can be done is being done. We have already commenced deploying well over 500 police, and the Commissioner will go through the further details. An hour ago, I discussed with the Assistant Defence Minister the Australian Defence Force deployment, and we will be provided with as much support as we need. In the initial deployment with the ADF will be something like 300, but I can easily forecast the fact that we will probably see more troops on the ground there. These joint operations are raised through well-established protocols under our Defence Aid to the Civil Power and Defence Aid to the Civil Community protocols. They are well exercised. The community needs to be reassured that this is nothing untoward. This is a normal joint operation between police, Defence Force and any other emergency services combat agencies that are required, and we will probably be drawing on some of those other combat agencies. The border between New South Wales and Victoria relies on about 55 crossings. The Commissioner will go through further detail, but people shouldn't assume that it's all going to be focused on Albury-Wodonga. If you want to do the wrong thing, you will be caught. There will be other agencies, there will certainly be police and defence personnel on those other crossings. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that we are serious when it comes to issuing these fines. They will be monetary and they could be custodial punishments. That's unfortunate, but it is the best thing that we can do to ensure that those that want to push the envelope know that we're serious. But it's also important for the people of New South Wales to know that there are going to be dire consequences for anybody who wants to endanger the health and well-being of our citizens. I'm now going to hand over to the Police Commissioner, who will go through some of the finer details of the operation and the deployment.
Thanks, Minister. Good afternoon. As you are aware, the New South Wales Premier announced yesterday that there will be a border closure between New South Wales and Victoria from midnight on Tuesday. Some 650 police are currently travelling down to the border to commence the operation. The Australian Defence Force has agreed to assist. There'll be some 100 members of Defence on the ground from Thursday, and that will grow to 350 over the weekend. Obviously, from the New South Wales Police perspective, it is an enormous operation, an enormous task, nevertheless, that we will be ready to go. We have categorised the roads from Tier A, B and C. The Tier A roads, which are the primary road crossings, are Wodonga Place, South Albury, Hume Highway, South Albury, Cobb Highway, Moama, Newell Highway, Tocumwah, Sturt Highway, Bongara, and the Princes Highway, Tambilika. These are the 5 primary crossings where there will be enormous amounts of resources, not just police but defence and transport and national parks and wildlife, to ensure that you can cross as easily as possible. There are 29 Category B roads that will have police resources on them. You'll be able to cross on those roads, but there may be greater delays. There are 20 other what we would class as dirt tracks and tracks that aren't regularly used as a crossing. These will be patrolled. They will be aerial surveilled using fixed-wing aircraft and drones. In terms of the health orders that are currently being struck, there are 3 key cohorts of people. That is, people from New South Wales who are currently in Victoria or who will be in Victoria from midnight Tuesday night. If they return, they will need to fill out the exemption form, and they will need to self-isolate at home for 14 days. So anyone from New South Wales who returns after midnight Tuesday will need an exemption, and they will need to isolate for 14 days. There are the border towns. I know there's an enormous amount of interest, particularly in the border towns, and in fact the delay in the health orders being finished is that we're trying to strike a good balance for those local communities, knowing full well People cross the borders every day for health, employment, education, and many, many other reasons. Can I say that that bubble or those postcodes will be seen differently to other Victorians? So we will make it certainly easier for those to travel across. They will need an exemption. It will more than likely just need to apply for a single exemption, and that will see them through this crisis. In terms of other Victorians that aren't in border towns, they are not allowed to come into New South Wales. You will need an exemption from that, and that will need to obviously be for some urgent reason. Some of the minor issues around trucks and large haulage vehicles, they will be green lighted through with an exemption, but we will be stopping and dip sampling those trucks. We envisage, best case scenario, the health orders will be ready sometime later this afternoon. Services New South Wales has been working over the night to have the technical solution in place so people can start applying for exemptions from early this evening. Now, we will let you know, we will put out warnings once that information is up on the New South Wales Government website. If there is a failure in any of the technology between now and midnight Tuesday night and you need to cross the border, you'll need to be patient, but you should approach police and explain the situation, and we will work with you, particularly those who have urgent needs around caring, health, and perhaps kids, schooling and other issues like that. So from my perspective, the next 72 hours from midnight, there will be challenges. We would ask, if you don't have to cross the border, please don't, because it will be the most challenging phase of the operation, particularly whilst we're working through the exemptions, while we're working through setting up the infrastructure, while we're trying to get it right. You have to understand we have to work with the bridges and the roads that are in place. These will all be assessed to make sure it's safe for police and safe for those who are trying to cross the border. Questions?
What will people living in border towns see when they wake up tomorrow? Will there be bollards blocking roads? How long will each interaction take as residents stop trying to pass?
Look, I imagine the first 72 hours, the interactions will take a little longer, but once people have their permit, there'll be warning signs through RMS to say, have your permit ready, your driver's licence ready, and that will move very quickly. But again, whilst we're working through this over the next 72 hours, we would just ask that if you don't have to cross the border, please don't attempt that. But nevertheless, if you need to, apply for your permit. If you can't get your permit, still approach police and explain the situation.
Commissioner, you mentioned yesterday that the prospect of an on-the-spot fine. Has there been a development on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The Health Minister has backed me in relation to that, so there will be... police will have powers to demand details from people. We'll have the powers to turn people around at the border. We will have powers to issue a fine, or on-the-spot fine, or charge people, and they could be liable to $11,000 fine and 6 months imprisonment. And most importantly, there will be a significant fine in relation to falsifying information that will allow you to come into New South Wales.
Do you have a figure on the on-the-spot fine as yet?
It'll be $1,000 at this stage.
Commissioner, who will be in charge of those permits and who will be entitled to them?
So New South Wales Health will be providing the exemptions. The permit system will be run through Services New South Wales, who have done an outstanding job through COVID-19, particularly in terms of messaging. And from our perspective, police will be the gatekeeper in relation to who we let in and who we don't.
Commissioner, you mentioned a little earlier that New South Wales residents returning home from tomorrow, as well as the need to self-isolate.
So that'll be sort of 12:01am Wednesday.
On Wednesday. So they will also need to apply for an exemption as well as self-isolating. Does that include people who might want to get a flight from Melbourne back to Sydney?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anyone travelling back from Melbourne has to be considered high risk. We know that the transmission rates there are increasing. We know that they haven't got control of that at the moment, and that is exactly why the borders are being closed. So if you can come back before midnight, I suggest you do, but if you are symptomatic, then you need to go straight to a health professional.
But if you've got a flight booked, say, for example, for Wednesday, for tomorrow, back home to New South Wales, you'll not be allowed to board that flight unless you've got that exemption in your hand?
No, unfortunately, we don't have. New South Wales Police, New South Wales Government doesn't have control of what happens in the other states and territories. It'll be about police and health workers receiving people as they come back from.
So what happens if you arrive on a flight into Sydney tomorrow and you're from New South Wales, you're returning from Melbourne, but you don't have an exemption?
Look, I think for the first 72 hours we will be reasonable in relation to that, noting that the service hasn't even come online yet. But in time it will be a simple system that has worked in Queensland. We know it works. We know people can use it quite easily. But clearly we're not going to stop people from New South Wales coming back into New South Wales. It is really about the self-isolation. Now, why is it important they fill out the paperwork? Is because we can't enforce self-isolation unless we know who the person is and we know where they live. And if you go back to when the operation started, that's how we were policing it, is that we had information in relation to people who were self-isolating coming back in from overseas, and police were door knocking just to make sure that they were complying. So that's such an important part of the process to ensure that people are complying.
Can you clarify the situation as it stands today? For New South Wales residents returning from any suburb in Melbourne now, do they need to self-isolate if they're arriving back on planes today? Because there was a lot of confusion at the airport.
Yeah, so the health order is clear that if you are from the hotspots and there are a certain amount of postcodes, then you must self-isolate when you return.
But haven't the hotspots now been expanded to include the entire city of Melbourne?
Absolutely, they have. That's correct.
So
Those people that are coming back from Melbourne have got to self-isolate now. Today, if they arrive today, self-isolate for 2 weeks, and you are threatening that you will follow that up and do checks to make sure they're there.
Absolutely.
And is that the case for anyone travelling from Victoria to New South Wales with a permit when the border closure comes into effect? Do they need to self-isolate coming from Victoria?
Yes, they do, absolutely. And we would ask anyone who's symptomatic to go straight to hospital, straight to seek health assistance.
And what about the border communities? Will they be able to, for example, someone in a border community, tomorrow morning, if they work across the border, will they be able to go to work tomorrow morning? What's the go there?
Look, they will. My greatest concern for them will be the congestion and the delay at this stage. So I would ask if anyone has a high level need because of medical reasons, then they need to throw their hands up so police can address that and assist them through quicker. But I guess if people could just be patient for one and over the next 72 hours not cross unless you really have to, that would be a great assistance to the people of New South Wales.
They'll still need a permit, the border community. They'll still need to apply through the Service New South Wales portal.
That is the intent at the moment, yes.
And what's the process by which someone will get approved that permit? Is it an automatic approval or will someone go through it?
It is an automatic approval if you fit the criteria, and obviously if there's some special conditions then that will go off to health and that will be individually assessed. And police will be questioning people obviously when they come in terms of the authenticity of the information that's in there, and that's why one of the more significant fines is actually misleading on those forms, because we need people to tell the truth, to protect the people of New South Wales.
What role are you anticipating Army personnel will play?
Look, for us, there's lots of roads, lots of bridges, and lots of coordination. They are great at logistics, they're great at operational planning, and they are a big organisation who can put troops on the ground, and we've worked so well with them through the bushfires and COVID-19. So they are a great assistance to New South Wales Police.
Are you checking the exemptions as well? Army personnel get to border checking those?
Probably not. It's not. I see them as a primary role in relation to that, unless we were absolutely stretched. So it would be a primary role for New South Wales Police to do that, and we actually have the powers to demand. They don't have those powers.
There are a number of dirt road crossings, and you've spoken about the use of winged aircraft and drones. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they will be used and how likely you actually think it will be that people are going to be trying to sneak in over rivers?
Look, I think a small percentage of people will try that. I think from our perspective, it's not useful to put defence and police on dirt roads 24/7 for one or two cars when we can use aerial surveillance, when we can have highway patrol cars with ANPR computers and cameras, and we have such wonderful technology. So, of course, if we get information and intelligence there's a particular road being used, then we will escalate and we'll take control of that road.
How does it work with the drones? Do you have a control centre of some sort where you have people monitoring your stuff?
So we have individual officers like from the police rescue who are trained in relation to it, and they will set up in certain areas, particularly those high-risk areas where there's lots of dirt roads, and they will run those. And alternately, we've got our fixed-wing aircraft down there as well, running out of Albury Airport.
How is the exemption system working, the permit system for people who are not in the border communities? I understand it's a service in South Wales, so maybe it might be a question for the Minister, but if you're not in a border community and you want a permit, how, what is allowable, like what would see you get that?
It would have to be essential work. You would imagine if there was a surgeon or a specialist or someone who needed to be into New South Wales and that was reasonable, then I imagine they would get a permit. But if it was just coming across to do your shopping or something sort of menial task, then that won't be accepted.
So what jobs are allowed and what jobs are not allowed?
That is being assessed as we speak, and I appreciate that is a key question. But I think the starting point for Victorians are that we don't want you to travel to New South Wales unless it's essential, and you're really going to have to prove that through the process. And if it's not, and I think people understand the reasons why behind that as well.
Commissioner, just for the sake of clarity, I was at the airport this morning and spoke to several people who came off flights from Melbourne. They were coming home, and they said, "Oh no, I was told I didn't need to self-isolate. I think I'm okay." So obviously there's been some miscommunication this morning. What do you say to those people who currently believe they don't need to self-isolate, even though they've come from Melbourne?
Anyone who's come out of the high-risk postcodes, and that's information that's provided from Victorian Health to New South Wales Health.
Is it just the high-risk postcodes now, or is it the entire, all of Greater Melbourne?
It has changed. The health order has changed, right? So you go from they're still postcode-based, right? So
is it not all Melbourne postcodes now?
But in a sense, for us to geocode it, it's all postcode based, if that's okay. So in relation to that is that you need to self-isolate, and anyone who's symptomatic needs to go and get tested, because the reality is the transmission rate there is the highest that we've seen in Australia since the virus has started.
So after this point, if you come from Wangaratta, for instance, do you have to self-isolate, get the permit, you come back into New South Wales, do you have to self-isolate for 2 weeks?
Yes. Yes.
Whole Victoria?
Yeah. From 12:01 Tuesday night.
Commissioner, does that order apply both ways? Will New South Wales residents be allowed into Victoria from midnight tonight?
We're not stopping people from New South Wales going into Victoria. Obviously, the Premier has been asking, and we are all asking for people in New South Wales not to travel there because of the rates of the virus, but we're not stopping people from going in. But the reality is you have to apply to come back, and when you come back, you go into 14 days isolation. So I guess you need to go there for, you'd imagine, a fairly urgent, pressing matter.
Commissioner, who is eligible for one of the border town permit exemptions? If someone works in a border town on the New South Wales border but lives 45 minutes away, an hour away, would they be eligible?
Again, we're working off a postcode because it's just the most simplest way of doing it, and people understand, and it comes back to your driver's licence. So it'll be based on postcodes, and again, I apologise, but that is what's taking so much time at the moment. It's 1,000 kilometres of borders. 9 LGAs on one side, 11 on the other. So there's an enormous amount of energy being put into that. But it is all about making sure that those local communities can coexist. Because we know that police cross the borders all the time to back up police. We know ambulance do. We know there's a whole range of good reasons why there needs to be a sensible bubble around those border towns.
Minister, somebody asked a question as well, just quickly. Minister, this is obviously costing a fortune. Victoria is not offering to supply any men at this stage, officers at this stage. Should they be contributing to this on their side of the border to try and help alleviate some of the costs and pressures on our police?
Well, I would think that to be the decent thing to do, given this is an outbreak that's caused by a situation in Melbourne, but we can't rely on other governments to do the right thing all the time. So as far as the New South Wales government is concerned, we will be providing the financial support that's necessary. Obviously, with the defence aid, that comes within each individual agreement, that application that's made.
How long will this last? Do you have any idea at this stage?
I think you're talking weeks rather than days. I think you can probably assume that with the effort being put into a deployment like this, it will be a couple of weeks, but obviously there's going to always be the requirement for us to review every single day as to how far ahead we plan the operation.
Do you know what the standard will be that they will have to meet before you open the border?
That'd be a matter for the Health Minister. That would certainly be a matter for Dr. Chant. But we'll be looking at the precedent set in Queensland and other states.
When will the exemption and the permit process be established? And if you work in a border town on New South Wales border but live somewhere else, does that mean you won't get a permit if you live further away from the border town?
Well, I think this isn't a punishment. And I think we need to approach this operation knowing full well that this is all about keeping the community safe. And I think what the first message and the last message from the government today is, if you don't have to cross that border, don't. If you don't have to come from Victoria to New South Wales, don't do it. Yes, there will be a significant military and police operation going on to monitor all cross-border activity. Yes, there are serious fines and indeed a jail sentence to anybody that wants to push the envelope. But please don't think that we're going to have police, military personnel, other emergency services there with big black sticks trying to punish people for doing something. If you don't have to cross, don't cross. If you do have to cross, well then obviously you go through the normal process, which will be established hopefully by the end of today through Services New South Wales. The next 72 hours are going to be challenging. The Commissioner and I are very conscious of that. The next 72 hours, people are going to be confused, communities are going to be upset, local businesses are going to be interrupted. But what we will always do as a government is to minimise the burden to the economy, minimise the burden to the people that have got loved ones on either side of the border, and obviously always work towards making sure that we can get a return to normal life. But to answer the question as to whether or not you have to live in that local area, I might invite the Commissioner to say it, but as far as I'm concerned, I would encourage everybody to work within the spirit of what we're trying to do here, as well as the legal parameters.
If you lived within the border bubble, if we call it that, then it will certainly be much easier to pass back and forth. If you live outside of that, you will have to apply for the exemption. Now, that may or may not be granted, depending on what health think at the time. That will depend on the transmission rate in that area, with that postcode where they live, and it may expand. We hope it doesn't. We hope they get hold of it and that this finishes sooner than later. So it is not impossible, but it will really depend on the circumstances at the time people make that application, what's happening in their town with the virus.
Will that be an automatic process like the border towns, or will that be manually approved?
So that anyone who's an exemption that requires any investigation will be manually done by a person in health looking at all of the circumstances.
Which one will be manual and which one will be automatic?
So anyone outside of the bubble would be manual, particularly if they are in metropolitan Sydney and the postcodes of concern.
Commissioner, can I ask your thoughts, given everything that we're going through as a state at the moment with the closures, what are your thoughts on the Instagram influencer who apparently tried to break out of mandatory hotel quarantine yesterday and I think has been issued with a PIN?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had over 30,000 people into the hotels, and most of them have behaved very well and just been happy to be home. We've looked after people. No one's been ill. We haven't lost anyone. That was the first person that had tried to seriously break out, and police and defence moved quickly in terms of arresting her. She was taken to hospital and assessed and was brought and given a ticket a short time later and taken to a health hotel. Well, I think it's just a waste of resources. It's been a pretty tough year for everyone. I think we're all busy. I think this is a type of emergency that has touched everyone in New South Wales, and I don't think it's a big ask to come into an ice hotel for 14 days to protect the rest of the community. There's lots of people doing it much harder than she was.
There are about 330 private security contractors that are also assisting with the quarantine hotel effort. Can you tell us about the vetting processes that go into place after what we saw happened in Victoria?
So Treasury are in charge of the vetting process. They obviously go through and have a set criteria. The security are on the floors. In terms of the perimeter of the hotels, running the overall logistics planning is all done by police, and that will continue. So the government has been clear that in New South Wales they wanted police to own the site and control the site, and I think police have done a very good job in that space.
They're asking about shared parenting across border communities. Can you give families any guidance on that?
Again, if you're within the two border towns, I want people to be confident that we're going to make it as easy as possible to cross. But again, you will still have to complete an exemption form, so we have history in relation to who is travelling into New South Wales. It would be particularly important if we have an outbreak.
And if it's outside that border bubble, the postcodes?
You would have to provide, obviously ask for an exemption, and again that will depend on the postcode that you come from and what's happening at that time. But again, if there was an urgent situation and a child needed assistance, and we would ask people to reach out. Obviously, get in line if they have to, and we'll work with anyone who has an urgent need.
Thanks, Tom.
Just quickly, Minister, there's a lot of speculation that Melbourne is about to go into a lockdown this afternoon. What's your reaction to that, first of all? Obviously a dramatic turn of events, not only for the state, but for the country.
Well, I think it is. It is a sad situation for Australia. I mean, it's the second largest city. It's the second strongest metropolitan economy, and I actually feel for the people of Melbourne who have certainly tried to do the right thing, but unfortunately, I think they've been let down by a number of circumstances.